I'm Alexa Burton, but you can call me Lexi. And today we're doing something a little bit different. I want to welcome you to my first episode of Two Chairs and a Camera. And I've got with me today Joe Clifford Faust, and we're going to talk a bit about books and writing and who knows what's going to come up. But let's just have some fun with this.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Joe Clifford Faust, author. I'm in full merchandising mode.
And I'm happy to link any links you send me down in the description below.
I will be happy to do that. And I will take this off because production values, you need light on my face. So I just had to wear that at the beginning. So, and speaking of full merchandising mode, I have a present for you.
Thank you very much.
And there's one for your significant other.
Thank you very much as well.
So there we go.
So I guess the first place is tell me about these.
Okay, well, let me grab one of my props here, and that goes with the hat.
Okay.
That is a little thing I came up with. I give those away when someone comes up at one of my book signings and buys this book, Furman's Devils, which this was originally published by Bantam Books in 1996 and 1997. It was originally supposed to be like this. This is how I envisioned the book when I was writing it. And my agent was like, "What are you working on?" And I told him, he goes, "That sounds interesting. Why don't you send me what you have?" And I had just reached the halfway point of the book.
Okay.
And there was a point in the book that takes a dark turn. First book is, first half is hilarity, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, what have they done? And the rest of the book is them trying to resolve that. So I sent that to him and didn't hear anything for like 2 years, and I thought, well, maybe he didn't like it or something, and he called me at work one day, and it was a Friday the 13th, so a bonus here. And he said, what are you working on? And I told him, and I said, I think I'm going to have the rough draft to you by such and such, and he goes, well, why don't you put that on hold? And I'm like, well, why? And he said, because I think Bantam is going to want you to finish Furman's Devils. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. So he had been sending it. He loved the book, the half that he'd read, and had been sending it out for 2 years. And so he placed the book, and he's like, okay. And he says, and you can write the second half of the book while Bantam's publishing the first half. And I'm like, whoa, time out. This is one book. And he said, but Bantam's going to pay you for 2 books. And it took me about 10 seconds for my resolve to crumble.
Oh.
So many years later, and actually the Science Fiction Book Club did publish an omnibus edition in hardcover, and it was one of their alternate selections way, back in the dark ages. But when I started getting all my rights back to all my books and publishing them myself, I decided to do a deluxe version. So in the omnibus, the chapter numbers weren't reconciled. It was still like 2 separate books in one volume. So I reconciled the chapter numbers, did a little light editing. I didn't have what's his name shoot first.
Greedo.
Solo. Yeah, Greedo. Yeah, I'm not really up on Star Wars, but yeah, Han, doesn't wait to be shot at.
I am a little bit. There's an R2-D2 and a Stormtrooper sitting up above my head.
Cool. So anyway, just some light stuff, and then I wrote an introduction because
self-indulgence. Yeah.
And then I had a novelette that I had written that I was never able to place because it's so weirdly written, but I just loved it. And I never could find a market for it, and it takes place in the same universe as this book, so I thought, I'll just stick that on at the end.
Bonus material!
Bonus material. So there's a little bit of author's commentary, no deleted scenes, but there's like an alternate chapter or something, I don't know. So
you gotta have bonus material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then everyone has to buy the collector's edition.
That's right, that's right.
Was this the first book you published? Well, in its other form?
No, I more or less started and did them chronologically.
Okay.
Only I was releasing them chronologically as I wrote them because I had a police novel called The Mushroom Shift that I actually wrote between what became my first published novel and the second one. And my editor at Del Rey was real impatient. She goes, finish that stupid police book so you can write another novel for me. I'm like, okay, Shelley, I'm going as fast as I can. And it's really strange because the first novel I wrote ended up being the third one I published, because after I had that one in the mail and I wrote A Death of Honor, and I finished Death of Honor and I realized it was like 100 times better than my first novel. So I shelved it and started something else, and then as time went on I revisited the first novel and I ended up cutting about half of it out.
All right.
So yeah,
I've gone back and read some early, I've gone back and read.
Yeah.
That's going to be in the blooper reel.
Yeah.
I've gone back and read some early stuff that I've written, and some of it is just so bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. I cannot read my own books after they've been published.
Yeah,
So
I haven't.
Yeah. When people ask me what my favorite novel is, it's always the one I'm working on at the time.
Well, I mean, I guess I've read the kids. I've read the kids' books, but that's
different. That takes you 5 minutes.
200 words.
This is an investment.
Yeah, that's an investment
Yeah.
of time. I have not picked up From Winter since I did the last edit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the book.
I could read this again, or I could keep reading H.G. Wells. You know,
I love H.G. Wells.
Which is what I'm making my way through the science fiction novels in chronological order.
Okay, I have not read all of them.
Yeah, I'm up to Food of the Gods, which is amazingly funny. It's very satirical, but
I really should read more of his stuff. I've read War of the Worlds, and The Time Machine, and there's another one.
Invisible Man.
Yeah, I read that,
Yeah, okay.
and Dr. Moreau.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's another one, and I do not remember what it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I remember I bought it in middle school through one of those little pamphletey things that they sent home.
Yeah.
I'd get those every month, and I'd circle like 18 books, and my mom would buy me like 4. And, and that's where I got the 2 books that I don't know if I still own them. That's where I got the 2 books, and I know one of them was A Time Machine, and the other one was Blue. But that's as best as I got. So, like, well, what else did you bring with you? I guess we should start there.
I brought a ton of stuff. Being her first guest here, I had to set some kind of standard. Excerpt from novel in progress if you're interested. We can
and
notice
reading.
It's heavily edited.
Oh, aren't they always?
Yeah. This one I kind of had to, because I haven't really looked at this since I first wrote it, and I first wrote it about 13 years ago.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm like, ooh, they don't make that kind of car anymore.
I tend to do a rolling thing with my edit.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just too big a project at the end of the book.
Yeah.
So, like, I am, my current book, which is the sequel to From Winter, I'm currently writing chapter 14 on the second edit for chapters 7 and 8 and the first edit for chapter 9. So it's a rolling thing.
Yeah. So a lot of times, since I started using a computer, I can be writing and go, oh, I need to do this and set the stage for this and put something in earlier, and I'd go back and put it in and then go in and keep writing. And with this book I'm working on now, it has turned into such a monster. I just have a list, and it's my retcon file.
Oh, goodness.
And it's all stuff like, okay, delete this stuff, and make sure they know about this, and make sure this guy says this much earlier, and, put in a reference to this sandwich, and, just all sorts of...
Now, I'm going to tell you guys a secret. When I was writing From Winter, and honestly, if any of you find me, like, a mistake with this, let me know down below, because I need to fix it now if you do. I don't remember what color I made the military uniforms. And I can't find it. And I don't know if I just didn't say what color they are.
Yeah.
But we need notes like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm referring to them in the next book, and I have no idea what color they're supposed to be.
Yeah. That's one thing I found out after I wrote A Death of Honor, which I will bring that out. This, here we go. A Death of Honor. This is my first published novel. It was originally published by Del Rey.
Oh.
Yeah.
Your first novel was published by Del Rey. I guess that was before self-publishing was so big.
Oh yeah, this is
so
like
it's
87.
It's still impressive, but it's not like, wow, he didn't have to self-publish the first one, because that's just what it was done back then.
Yeah, and this is self-published now. We can talk about that whole self-publishing thing. That's a whole rabbit hole to fall down. And anyway, I wrote this, and there are it has a lot of my books have love triangles in them, because great way to build tension and stuff like that. So one guy torn between two women, and I described them in very specific ways, and people would come up to me after they'd read it and go, "Oh, I think so and so should play such and such in the movie," right? You know, because you get that.
I would love for my books to be a TV show.
Yeah. Movies are junk anymore, but TV shows, streaming, limited series, 8 episodes. You know, maybe a second season of 8, depending on.
Or how they do it, where like, because not all my books are going to be direct sequels, but they're going to be in the same world. Yeah. So you can have like the mini series of 8 episodes, and then the next one is a different book that's a totally different cast, because it's a different story, but it's still. Yeah.
See that's one of my.
We're just spinning all over this, but that was the point of this.
Yeah. And that's one of my cultural things, and that's why I think that British TV is so much better than American TV. Okay. Because with American TV, it's like, okay, we've got this good idea, and it's a series, and what do? 26 episodes a year.
Not so much anymore, but
and if it's a hit, we're talking coming out of the network era, and then you run it into the ground for 10, 12, 14
And then they only
seasons.
plan the storyline for like the first 3 to 5.
Yeah.
So after that, there's a dramatic shift in the vibe.
Mm-hmm. Or if it's kind of open-ended, like Blue Bloods or Big Bang Theory, those are both ran forever.
Grey's Anatomy. Yeah. They're on season 21, 22.
I couldn't believe they were on that long. I've never followed the show.
They're still going.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So anyway, they have these shows and they run them into the ground. And with British shows, it's like, okay, 8 episodes, and then we're done for the season. And then maybe 2 years later, you get season 2. And
is that why we're still getting another season of Red Dwarf next year?
I think Red Dwarf was just kind of...
It just keeps going.
It kind of ran the course, and then they quit for a while, and then they came back, and then they quit.
And they came back, and then we got the movie back in 2020. Yeah. Yeah, there's another season coming out next year.
And I realized, I was like, okay, well, Fawlty Towers is probably the best sitcom ever. And it was 3 seasons, and I think each season was like 6 episodes or 8.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, it's great. John Cleese from Monty Python. It's just brilliantly funny. And I started realizing, well, what are some of my other favorite shows? Well, I love Band of Brothers, and that was like 10 episodes. And I love Justified, and that was like 6 or 7 seasons. But each season was like 8 episodes or 10 episodes, and I'm like, well, they did it right. They didn't.
I do like some of the longer, because the reason I tend to prefer TV over movies is you get more character development.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But like, when you can tell that the story arc is over and they start struggling. Yeah. That's my issue.
Back to this. We got off on a tangent.
Tangents are fun.
Yeah. Anyway, I wrote those 2 women very specifically, and people would come, when it gets made into a movie, I think so and so should play Myra, and I'm thinking that is the exact opposite of how I saw Myra when I wrote it. And someone else would say, oh yeah, I think so and so should play Trina, and exact opposite. And so after that, I just quit describing characters, because that's the cool thing about writing is your readers are magic.
I had such an argument with my editor over, because I used the word grizzled in describing Hamar in a character in one of my books, and he's like, he wouldn't be grizzled, he wouldn't look like that, he would be put. everyone else I asked who's read the book, oh yeah, I'd show a series of pictures, what I thought and what my editor thought he looked like.
Yeah.
And everyone thought it was what I thought. So I'm like, okay, dude,
Yeah.
this is what he looks like.
Sometimes I think editors, you can get really good editors like, rest his soul, Maxwell Perkins. And those days are long gone, because he nursed the careers of like Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and especially Thomas Wolfe. Nursed their careers along. And now editors are busy going to sales meetings and conventions and stuff like that, and they want books that are pretty much ready to go.
My editor is not an editor by trade.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
He works well for me.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
just the occasional disagreement.
Yeah. When I was shopping this around, my wife had to talk me into sending it to Del Rey because I was intimidated. They were publishing Robert Heinlein. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, at the time I lived in Wyoming. I'm like, I'm just, schnook that lives in Wyoming. What do they want with me? But I'd sent it to Band Books.
Okay.
And didn't hear anything back, and all of a sudden I got this letter from them, and they were interested, but they were like, there's one thing we'd like you to change. And what they wanted is, the way I had written the book, I just kind of, the way I do world building is I dribble it out.
Okay.
I don't front load anything. I don't do info
You give
dumps.
it naturally.
Yes, and it's like, how they say you should write the kind of book you want to read.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of book I want to read.
Yeah.
And you're figuring out, oh, this cultural thing happens, and oh, that all fits together, and going back to this. This takes place at an advertising agency, so each chapter begins with a commercial that the main character has written, and they all interlace with the plot.
Okay.
So I love that kind of stuff, and so that's how
I like when things interconnect in ways like.
And then there you are on page 259, and you have an aha moment because you go, oh yeah, that thing that happened back 100. Yeah, I love.
Or when a character from this book over here that's not really part of this, it shows up and
Yeah.
I love that.
Exactly, stuff like that. We're foaming at the mouth here, folks. So, what they wanted is they said, we need you to rewrite chapter 1 so you explain why the world is the way it is and tell us everything we need to know. And I wrote back, I said, thank you so much. I was very polite about it. And I basically told her what I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of book, these are the books I've always admired and loved reading, and that's how I wrote this. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit and ultimately agreed to disagree. And then I sent it to Del Rey, and the rest is history. Almost. Then I was at the very first Buckeye Book Fair.
Okay.
Signing a Death of Honor. And this lady comes up to me, and she's like, oh, your book got published by Del Rey. Congratulations. I'm, oh, yeah, I'm very excited and stuff. And she gives me a business card. She's a rep with Band Books. And she's like, if you
Did she know the book?
No, she is just trying to recruit me.
She didn't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so she gave me this card, and I'm like, oh, Band. I said, you know what? I sent this book to Betsy Mitchell, and we agreed to disagree on it. And she started laughing. She says, wait until I tell Betsy. And I'm kind of like, that was my, gotcha.
I have one of those I'm hoping to get, but we're just not going to talk about that quite yet.
Okay.
I'll tell you off camera.
Okay, cool with that.
Dreams.
Dreams.
We all have.
There you go. So, that's my Death of Honor story.
Did you want to read us what you're working on?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, this shouldn't take too long. I just got a few short pages. I don't know how to describe this book.
What's it called?
Do
you have a title?
I do have a title, but I'm real cagey about titles until I finish it. So, I'm just calling it the UFO novel.
Okay.
Because it's about something that crashes in this small town in Wyoming, and it's the effect that it has on the town.
Okay.
But it's not like, people start growing third arms out of their abdomen or stuff like that. It's more of a social kind of thing. And part of the story is, and this is the beginning of chapter 3. What has happened is The book starts with the sheriff's office going out and breaking up a teen beer party.
Okay.
And while they're breaking it up, something weird goes overhead, and they all stop and look up, and then they go on. And then by chapter 3, in chapter 2, they hear this loud noise, and we better go check this out. So they've seen a prairie fire, and so the 2 deputies are going to drive up down the road and see what has happened, because there's weird noise and all that stuff. So this is where they are. And each chapter starts, I'm not going to read it, but just as a extra hood, each chapter starts with a social media post from one of the characters.
Okay.
And some of the characters and some of the characters are just like people you never see. It's just people observing things and stuff like that. So I could read it, and then I'd have to explain. So
let's just jump in. And,
just jump into the action.
Exactly.
So let me get a sip of this.
Yeah, I've kept you talking.
Okay. All right. I always make changes as I'm that guy, yeah. Okay. Purple flickered across the prairie grasses and sagebrush and slopes of the hills, the product of the expedition's blue and red overhead spinning across the countryside. The siren blared, a warning to any hapless jackrabbit or antelope who happened to be loitering near the road. Monmouth at the wheel, footworking the pedals, navigating the road. Kavanaugh leaning against his seat belt, arms folded and down on the dash, squinting out the window, watching the rise of orange, glowing billows. Still ahead, he told Monmouth. It looks like another hill or 2 away. Not bad considering he doesn't know the terrain, Monmouth thought, his own guess being 2 hills and 2 bends in the road, the first of which he steered through. Hold up, Kavanaugh shouted. We got something here. He pointed 45 degrees from the path of the road, and Monmouth saw it. There was a small grass fire maybe 150 feet off the road, slowly lapping at the dry undergrowth, wanting to catch up with the rest of the conflagration. Monmouth hit the brake, and the vehicle skidded to a halt, enveloping it in clouds of dust. He punched the button to open the rear hatch and rolled out of the vehicle, barking at Kavanaugh. Get your light on that thing. The young officer pulled the streamlight from his belt, clinking it on and aiming it with a practiced motion. The fire was in a misshapen ring, maybe 10 feet in diameter, licking flames around the carbonized center. He played the light back and forth, assessing. It's not too bad, LT. I think we could lick it if... Monmouth quickly stepped past him, and white clouds erupted around him in short bursts. Yeah, Kavanaugh muttered. Had one of those. Monmouth followed the circumference of the fire, keeping the nozzle of the extinguisher low, sweeping it back and forth, shooting white clouds at the base of the flame. Kavanaugh went into the burned-out part of the ring, light pointed up, stomping any glowing embers he found. As the lieutenant circled around him, he put the boot to a small flame, then moved over and brought his foot down. It landed with an odd hollow sound. Hey, LT! He played his light down. The light glinted off of something that reflected a brief rainbow. Got a piece of the plane here. Leave it, Monmouth said. The Air Force will want it. Kavanaugh rolled the light across the object again, trying to get the rainbow again, but couldn't. Wait, he said. Monmouth looked up from the extinguisher. Did I miss a spot? Kavanaugh snaked his foot out and kicked at the object. It made the hollow sound again. This isn't metal. Is it the black box? No, it's like a melted piece of plastic. He crouched down and held the beam on it. It was maybe a foot across, warped from probably the fire, and from this angle the light seemed to pass through it, bending and revealing what it was made from. Bees, he said as Monmouth shouldered the fire extinguisher. What? Kavanaugh reached out and tapped it with a gloved finger. There was more of a thump this time, without the hollow ring. This thing was made by bees, or it looks like it. There's a honeycomb thing in it. What's it called again? Remembering the image on the map in the trailer. A hexagon. The base of the extinguisher thudded down on the ground next to the object as Monmouth took a knee. See? Kavanaugh traced across the surface with his finger. Inside was a network of coppery hexagons looking as if they'd been extruded inside a material that alternated between reflective and translucent. Too small for a honeycomb, Monmouth said. It looks manufactured. Not tooled, Kavanaugh said. This isn't plastic either. He thumped it again with a finger. It's like resin, but it's keeping the heat in. I can feel it through my glove. pushing a finger against it like ringing for an elevator. The resin gave under it slightly. He lifted his finger and the resin raised back into place, the surface pushed by the network of hexagons. "All we go to hell," Monmouth said. "We should get a picture of this." "I don't think that's such a good idea." Monmouth stood, picking up the extinguisher. Kavanaugh thumped it again. "It sings," he said. "You know, you tap a light bulb and you get that sound off the filament? There's this ringing after the thump." "Listen." Kavanaugh picked it up with 2 fingers and waved it in the air. Monmouth closed his eyes, and yes, the kid was right. Can't read my handwriting. It was glassy and had an almost choir-like quality, being both familiar and eerily strange at the same time. "I'd put that down if I were you," he said, "or else your hair will probably fall out and you'll lose the ability to make babies. Besides," he started to walk toward the car, "we've got bigger fish to fry." Kavanaugh stood, transfixed by the object, until he became aware of the orange glow in his peripheral vision. "That's right, I'm a cop now." He laid it back down, gave the thing one more tap with the toe of his boot, and walked away, the singing fading quickly with the distance. "You sure we shouldn't bring this in as evidence?" he called to Monmouth. The LT put the extinguisher back in its bracket and slammed the hatch shut. "You've seen those sci-fi movies where somebody finds an alien object and he takes it home and puts it under his bed, and before he knows it, he's grown a third eye and has started feeding on neighborhood pets?" Kavanaugh gave him a stare of disbelief. "That's nothing compared to what the U.S. government will do to you if you make off with a piece of their airplane." He climbed into the Explorer and slammed the door. "That wasn't metal," the rookie said, climbing in and fastening his seatbelt. "Last I heard, we still made planes from metal." "What about stealth aircraft?" Monmouth pulled back onto the road. "Still has a metal skeleton," Kavanaugh said. "The surface is composite, like the handle of your Glock." "That's what that was?" "That was like nothing I've ever seen in an extruded resin." "And what makes you an expert at that?" "Summers in the factory where my dad was plant manager," Kavanaugh said. "I spent 6 of them catching tetrafluoroethylene monofilaments and other interesting things. None of them were singing hexagons." "Because obviously you didn't have security clearance," Monmouth said. "I think that was a real find, LT. Tell you what." Monmouth raised his foot from the gas as they topped a hill a little too fast, and the Explorer hopped over it. "Let's get to this big fire and assess the situation. Do what we can. Keep trying your cell. We need to get this resolved, and we'll stop on the way back, and you can pick up your souvenir." Kavanaugh smiled, nodded. "Just don't come whining to me when federal agents pay you a visit and you spend the next 6 years in quarantine until you sign a paper promising to forget everything clear back to your 12th birthday, okay?" "Tell you what," Kavanaugh smiled, "if you let me go pick that thing up, I'll run into the 7-Eleven and buy you some tinfoil so you can make a new hat." Monmouth glanced at Kavanaugh, rolled his eyes. "Make yourself useful and try the phones again, okay?" He leaned down and tried the knobs of the radio again, shaking his head at the strange interference. Kavanaugh pulled his smartphone from the floor and punched in the number with 2 thumbs. Squealing filled the air. He cut it off and tried Monmouth's phone. Same thing. "Okay," Monmouth said. "We've got to have a plan in place here to try and preserve our own lives and get the word out." Kavanaugh nodded. "What we do is we get to the fire, assess it. How big is it? Which way is it headed? Is the wind pushing it? The big picture. Then we make for one of the ranch houses and hope somebody's got a landline that's working." "Works for me," Kavanaugh said, "though I'd hope to die with at least some sergeant's stripes." "You're making it hard for me to like you," Monmouth said, and then gasped. The Explorer topped the next hill, and there it was, the fire all laid out in front of them. It ran from the base of the hill to a line of cottonwood trees and indicated the presence of a creek, most of them burning. It came toward them as far as the right side of the road, but hadn't jumped it yet, and on the far end was burning up the side of another hill. "Wind is pushing it north," Monmouth said, stopping. "Involved area is about the size of a couple of football fields," Kavanaugh said. "And look," he pointed down the road. Off to the left where the road curved around the next hill, and on the other side of the hill there were 4 small fires. "It jumped the road up there." "Couldn't have," Monmouth said. "Pieces of wreckage. The sucker was burning when it came down." "Shot down?" "My money is on mechanical failure." "There were 2 explosions, LT. He opened the car and stepped out. "The engine, then the fuel tank, or vice versa." Monmouth clicked on the spotlight and shone it toward the small cluster of fires. It caught on something, a rainbow at first, and then began to flutter in the wind. "There's something out there." "It's the same stuff I saw back there," Kavanaugh said, "but it's thinner, like a membrane." "A chute," Monmouth said. "Somebody bailed. Let's get over there." He jumped out of the car and started running down the road. He crossed over to the other side, grabbed a fence post, and hopped over the barbed wire. Cavanaugh right behind him, grabbing the same post and using his long spindly legs to step on the top wire and launch himself over. The wind caught the membrane and it billowed up, backlit by the small fires behind it. Cavanaugh was right. It looked like it was filled with a network of hexagons. Then everything went dazzlingly white. It stopped them both, and they fought with their eyes trying to get their bearings. Then their ears filled with a familiar beating sound. "Stop where you are," boomed a metallic-tinged voice. "Return to your vehicle and return home." Monmouth looked up at the source of the light. "This is under the jurisdiction of the United States Air Force. Go back to your vehicle and return home."
Wow. I love the way the characters interact.
Oh, thank you.
The way they bounce off each other.
Thank you.
But, I don't suppose that you've got any kind of release date goals yet.
My current goal is I should have it done by February if I keep up my current rate.
Okay.
And by the way, that is a Lexi podcast exclusive. I haven't read. I've never read any of that to anybody yet. So,
wow.
So you're the first to get to hear some of that.
Thank you. We're honored. You heard it here.
Heard it here first. That's right.
I can't get that out. How many books have you gotten published at this point?
Okay. When I was officially publishing, I had 7.
Okay.
5 with Del Rey, and then the 2 Furman books with Bantam.
Right.
As I've released them on my own, I think this will be officially, the one I'm working on will be number 10, because the count changes since I combined the Furman books. But I've actually written, this will be my 13th, because I've got a book I ghost wrote for a known figure, although maybe not known so much now because he's been dead for a while, but I'm still under contract. They'll come and take away my firstborn male child. And besides that, the guy was a Pulitzer Prize winner and should have written his own book, but that's another story.
That's another story for when the contract is up.
Yeah, so I ghost wrote one, and then I've had a couple that are just kind of one's languishing, and I was going to publish it when I started publishing my own stuff, and it was a political thriller, and I was looking at it and I went, no, this is really dated now, and it's just, it wouldn't be worth putting out. And then I've got, I decided to write a probably a middle grade or a little younger, maybe 6th grade level science fiction book, because I thought,
you gotta get them started somewhere.
You gotta get, that's exactly right.
I started science fiction in 6th grade.
And there's other ways to do it other than Star Trek and Star Wars novels. You know, you gotta broaden
it was Star Wars.
Well, I'm not gonna blame you. You're a few decades younger. I had to start with like Heinlein and A.E. Van Vogt. You know, some of those real hardcore guys.
I'm not sure how she got away with this. My 6th grade reading teacher showed us Star Wars as part of the curriculum.
Really?
Yeah, she was teaching Hero's Journey.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, whatever. It got me into Star Trek. Got me into Star Trek. Well, it got me into Star Trek, too. But it got me into science fiction.
Yeah. Well, the children's book I wrote, young person's book, I don't know. To me, it was, I was kind of hearkening back. I don't know if you've heard of the book The Spaceship Under the Apple Tree.
No.
By Louis Slobodkin. I read that when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. It was a chapter book. And I think that's where I started liking science fiction. And then a couple of years later, this new show, well, first Lost in Space came on.
I love Lost in Space. So I guess if you go back far enough, I was watching Lost in Space when I was 6.
Yeah, I went from Batman, and then Lost in Space made me forget Batman. And then this other new show came on called Star Trek. And all of a sudden, and all of a sudden,
Lost you're just lost.
Was lost
you're
forever.
You're lost to science fiction forever.
Although I should add, when this whole thing started, I was living in Canada at the time. My dad was in the oil industry, and he moved around a lot. We moved to Edmonton because there's a lot of oil up there. And when I was in 2nd grade, I came home after school and had the TV on, and this was back in the day when you didn't have as many channels, and in Edmonton they only had like 2 TV channels. And I turned one on, and there was this weird program about an old man that came out of like it looked like a phone booth.
Doctor Who. I have actually never seen Doctor Who.
I saw the William Hartnell Doctor Who episodes as they were being released, because they sent them to Canada, because of the Commonwealth and everything. And yes, I hid behind the couch when the Daleks were on, because they were terrifying to a second grader. Yeah, so
I need to watch it.
Yeah. And then I lost track of it, and when I was in college, I was bored one Saturday night, and I turned it on, and I'm like, who's this weird curly-headed guy with the big scarf?
Yeah, because they changed.
Chasing Daleks. And then I started, my gosh, the show has been on for 20 years, and I never realized it. But not like I could have watched it when I was growing up in Wyoming, because I was lucky the Denver PBS station had Monty Python, which is another story altogether. But
Did you have anything else you wanted to tell us about, talk about?
Oh, well, let's see. Speaking of marketing, I mean, I've got other books and stuff, but I'll bring these out momentarily to set the stage. This is actually the first novel I ever wrote, and this is the one that got cut in half. And talk about killing your darlings. There was a scene in the original draft of this where one of the main characters got beat up by a woman. And I've still got it in my files, because I'm like, someday somebody's going to get beat up by a woman, and I'm going to need that scene. So I wrote this and shelved it, and then rewrote it, and managed to sell it. I pitched it to my editor at Del Rey as first book of a trilogy, and she said, what are the other books about? And I said, well, the third book is, I said, the first book, they rescue some stuff that's been stolen from, the intergalactic mafia, basically. And the third book, they return it, and they have all sorts of trouble returning it, because the people that had it were crooks. And she said, what's the middle book about? And I said, well, the middle book is, because you have to have a trilogy, right? So that's how I pitch it. I said, well, the middle book is about how it gets from point A to point B. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I started this book. And this is one of my favorite books, just because of that.
Just the way things work.
Yeah.
When I started From Winter, I thought it was going to be a 20,000 word short-ish story.
Yeah.
It's almost 90,000 words. and the sequel is going to be longer.
Yeah. I'm afraid you have George R.R. Martin's disease. Or J.K. Rowling's disease. Take your pick.
First, I don't think Chris was pretty long.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd been talking to my editor at Del Rey, and she was like, I'd like to see something, more galactic, planets, aliens, and stuff. So in this book, I introduced my first aliens, and I had a really cool physiology teacher in high school. He lived across the street from me, and I was a big science geek too. And I took several classes from him. And in one class, in the physiology class, he had an exercise where he had us get into groups, and we had to design a creature based on
I used to draw aliens.
Yeah. But it had to be very practical, and some had big ears for cooling and stuff like that. We had a long neck, and we had eyes on 4 sides so it could see predators coming, because it was a grazer. Cool stuff like that. So I kind of used what I learned from Mr. Lusso to make aliens. And
sorry, my table's kind of.
Oh, that's okay. About 2 years ago, I was signing books at an Odd Mall event. And one of the other writers is going around. He's dressed like one of his characters. He got the big long robe and everything, and he had an owl perched on his shoulder.
I think I've seen this guy.
Yeah, a great guy. And I'm like, that is such a cool owl. And so we got to talking. There's a guy in Akron that builds stuff like that. And it just hit me all of a sudden. I thought, I need something to get people's attention to put on my table. So I got in touch with this guy.
You did.
I did. It cost more money than I want to talk about, but I had him make Mr. Bob. And here is Mr. Bob.
Oh.
And I said, I want him to be able to hold a book, so he's like articulated, and these hands can be wrapped around the book and his head, and this can come off or be put back up on.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's got little legs so he can
sit and
sit and
stand.
Sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
And he's been packed. So, but see, the heads
Oh,
are
he's fine.
articulated. And
He's got many fingers.
yes, they're
8 fingers?
yeah, they are. When I decided to design the alien, I thought about all these tropes in science fiction. And what kind of aliens do you usually see in science fiction? You see humanoid, lizard people, cat people, you know, because people have, science fiction writers are lonely and they have cats and they can watch the cat. And, you know, and famously Hobbes from Kelvin and Hobbes was inspired by the guy's cat, you know. And I'm like, I want to do something way out in left field. So these are based on crayfish, roughly. So.
Okay.
So.
But now here's the question: because he's got 8 fingers on each hand, did you have to redo the mathematical system for his people? To be base 16?
No, because these creatures are on their native world. They are more like crayfish, and in the big revelation in one of these books is they have cracked their own genetic code.
Okay.
And part of the backstory of the book is humanity is coming out of a long war with these creatures. Okay. And it was just a cultural misunderstanding.
Well, aren't most things?
Yeah. So what these things, the Arcolians did, is they genetically engineered aliens that were capable of interacting with people on their own level, as opposed to trying to send a crayfish in a tank or whatever.
Okay, so like this would be aquatic.
No, he's not. He's
the engineered one.
He's one. Yeah, and they had several different forms of him, and he was like, I can't remember. He has they. So
the 16 fingers isn't necessarily their natural number of digits.
Right. That's just.
So you could still hearken it back to a base 10 mathematics if you ever needed
I had
math.
to, yeah. I'm not a hard science fiction person by any stretch of the
Neither am I.
imagination.
It's just one of those little things that niggles in my brain.
Yeah. Actually, if you want to read a book about aliens that use base 8, there's a novel called Footfall by Larry Niven.
I just can't imagine
baby elephants.
that it would be to try and write that mentally. The mental gymnastics that you would have to go through to figure out a base something else system. Yeah.
Well, Niven did it because, I call it the baby elephants from outer space novel, because this race of beings have, they look like elephants, but their appendages are all in their trunk, and there's 8 of them. So they do everything in base 8 because
that's what they've got.
They're prehensile trunk hands, and they fly spaceships, and they've been throwing meteors down on Earth and all this stuff. And I have a love-hate relationship with the book because part of it I really liked, but my suspension. I have trouble like reading fantasy. Okay. And my joke is I have trouble seeing creatures that you have to drink half a quart of whiskey in order to see them. You know. Okay. So I had trouble with seeing the baby elephants. All I could think of was that Henry Mancini song, da 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 da, and there's a copyright strike for you.
We'll just beep that out. The circus song.
Yeah. From Hatari. So there's that, and the fact that he named his characters. I think what he did to name his characters is he took his Scrabble game and just put them in a jar and just started pulling out letters, because
try that.
But there was no. You get these names that were all vowels and stuff, and I'm just like, okay, one of the elephants said this, and the other elephant said that, and I just go by the first letter, you know, and just.
That is something I have taken to in my books. Is I try to make sure that no 2 main characters have a name that start with the same letter. Because my names are a little out there because it's aliens.
Yeah.
So whether or not you can pronounce them, and I do put a pronunciation guide at the beginning, they don't have the same first letter. So
Yeah.
if you do go S said, H said, you're still gonna know who's who.
Yeah. Okay. True confessions. My writer's kryptonite is naming characters.
There's name generators.
I know there's. Well, I have.
Or you can get a bag of Scrabble letters.
I have trouble naming people Stan and Bob and stuff like that.
I saw this online somewhere. You go to Starbucks and you wait for them to call out a coffee order.
There you go. There you go. Well,
congratulations, Leon. You're now in my book.
Yeah. I like that. I'm gonna have to try that. This book I'm working on now. I realized I had a couple of people named Frank. Okay, that goes in my retcon notes. I realized I had a couple of characters whose first name started with A, and then their last name was Mc something. So
you really like those. Would that be Scottish?
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
yeah, that'd be Scottish.
Yeah, when I was in Canada, I used to look at the phone book, and there was this whole, just pages of Macs, MC and then MAC, and I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. So it must have stuck. So the last character I introduced was a nurse, and it's just like a one-off character. She's in like 1.5 chapters. And I'm like, what am I going to name her? And I went through a couple of names. I'm like, no, that's too much like this. Oh, wait, no. I thought it'd be fun to my son-in-law is an RN. He's a hospice dispatcher. Okay. And he was a travel nurse for a while. I was like, okay, I'm going to name this nurse after Robbie. So I named her Roberta. And then I realized one of the three main characters is named Robert. Okay, I can't do that. So okay, I'm going to name it this. No, I can't do that because another character has a similar name. So I went on this dating app and I just scrolled through until I found a woman who was a nurse. Okay, your name is Verry. So.
Well, whatever works.
Yeah.
My mom's a teacher and she used to come home with names. Because she taught in the inner cities, so there were some interesting names. And she'd come home with names and they'd end up in books.
Yeah. And one other source, I mentioned that I worked for a bowling alley. In
the people that...
Yeah. And I put their names up, and there's some great names.
Yeah, there's great names out there.
In fact, one of the I just named a guy Trowbridge because we had a bowler get an honor score, and I'm like, I really like that name. That's really really cool. And like with the Furman's novels, I didn't have any problem naming characters because I wanted all the advertising agency people. One of the conventions in the book is all the advertising agency people. They only go by their last names, and that's you never find out what Bodeker's first name is.
Okay.
There's an intern. I think you find out her first name, but she's kind of the exception. And then all the gang members in the book, you know what their names are.
I never really had to mess with last names yet.
Yeah. So what I did was, knowing I was going to write the book and need a lot of corporate sounding names, every time I heard a name that sounds corporate, I would write it down, and I just had like a file box.
I've got a file of Mayacon names that I can use.
Yeah. And so, okay, time for a new character. Okay.
Yep.
You're Honecker in accounting. There we go.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that we've come to a good closing point, and I want to thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thanks
This
for
was a
having
lot
me.
of fun. I hope you all had fun. I'm going to link all of his, I don't know if you've got social media author stuff or if it's just going to be a list of books. I'm going to link all of his stuff down below in the description. So go check out Joe's books and merchandise and whatever else he's got. And it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to wrap these up. I guess that's all I've got for today. And as always, I'll see you next time.